I turned off the light. The room went dark. I lay down on the mattress in the corner of the beige apartment. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't set an alarm. I didn't need to wake up early to manage someone else's crisis. The crisis was over. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. My life was just beginning. People say the wheels of justice turn slowly. But if you grease them with a stack of forensic evidence and a federal inquiry, they can start moving with terrifying speed. The SEC didn't just open an investigation into Apex Global. They tore it apart. Within 48 hours of my email, federal agents were walking out of Apex Global's headquarters carrying boxes of hard drives and financial records. The image of Jeremy's meticulously curated office being dismantled was broadcast on every financial news channel in the country. I didn't watch it on television. I watched it from a witness room in the federal courthouse. Across the table sat the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Miss Vance. Beside me was Sienna Hollister, looking like a general who had already won the war and was simply overseeing the cleanup. "We need your statement regarding the signature," Miss Vance said, "and we need to understand the full extent of the asset misappropriation." So I told them everything. I told them about the draft horse text messages. I told them about the business trip to the Maldives. I told them about the years of financial gaslighting. But the real drama unfolded during the internal disciplinary hearing at Apex Global. A recording of that meeting was later subpoenaed and played during the proceedings. In the video, Jeremy looked nothing like the confident executive I had once married. His tan from the Maldives had faded into a sickly gray. He stood in front of his own partners, trying desperately to save himself. "This is all a misunderstanding," Jeremy pleaded on the screen, his hands trembling. "You have to understand my wife Claire is unstable. She has significant childhood trauma. She imagines things." He swallowed hard. "The signature discrepancy was a staff error. I was simply trying to protect company assets from her erratic behavior." I watched the video from my seat in the courtroom, a cold stone forming in my stomach. Even at the end, even when he was cornered, his instinct was still the same. Paint the woman as hysterical, discredit the victim, call her crazy. That was when Sienna stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply walked to the podium and placed a file on the table. It was thicker than a Bible. "Your Honor," Sienna said calmly, "the defense claims Mrs. Davenport is unstable." She opened the file. "We submit 15 years of credit card statements, loan applications, and medical bills taken out in my client's name by Rachel Davenport and Louise Davenport." A ripple moved through the courtroom. Sienna continued. "We also submit proof that Mr. Jeremy Hartwell was aware of this identity theft and actively used it as leverage to coerce my client into financial compliance." She paused. "This was not a staff error." She looked directly at Jeremy. "This was a systemic, decade-long extraction of wealth from a victim who had been groomed to remain silent." The silence in the courtroom was absolute, but the final nail in Jeremy's coffin came from the past, from a man who had been dead for decades. Maximilian Lancaster. Sienna pulled out another document, one buried deep inside the original corporate charter of Lancaster Holdings. It was a clause I hadn't even known existed until Sienna discovered it during her forensic dive into the archives. "Section 4, paragraph 2, she said. "The founder integrity clause," she read slowly. "The holder of the Class 5 shares retains the unilateral right to void any commercial contract or alliance if the counterparty is found to have committed fraud against the Lancaster family name or assets." It sounded like legal jargon, but in practice, it was a nuclear weapon, because I held the Class 5 shares, which meant every deal Jeremy had built using the Lancaster reputation was now worthless. The sale to the foreign investors? Void. The collateral he used for his margin calls? Void. The partnership agreements he signed with other firms based on Lancaster assets? Void. One clause, one sentence, one signature. Sienna didn't just sue Jeremy. She erased his entire professional portfolio. The moment the judge accepted the clause was something I will never forget. My family was sitting in the front row behind Jeremy. They looked smaller than I had ever seen them. They looked terrified. My mother, Rachel, suddenly stood up. Her dress hung loosely on her frame as if she had lost weight in a matter of days. "Your Honor," she cried, her voice cracking. "Please, my son-in-law was only trying to help the family. We are good people. We go to church." Her voice grew louder, desperate. My daughter is just angry because we went on a vacation without her. Sit down, Mrs. Davenport, the bailiff warned sharply, but my father was already on his feet. It's the banks, Conrad shouted, waving his arms. The banking system is too complicated. How are we supposed to know which card is which? This is all a misunderstanding. Beside him, Louise the pageant princess sat weeping into a tissue. She looked up at the judge with wide, innocent eyes. I thought I was just signing a permission slip, she sobbed. I was only trying to help my sister. The same helpless tone she had used when we were children. The judge slammed his gavel down. The crack echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Enough, the judge barked. This is a federal courtroom, not your family dinner table. The room fell silent. I am looking at forensic logs, he continued coldly. I am looking at forged IP addresses. I am looking at a stolen identity. His gaze swept across the front row. Do not insult my intelligence with tears. Then he turned to Jeremy. Mr. Hartwell, the judge said, in light of the overwhelming evidence, the prosecution has offered a plea agreement. Jeremy slowly stood. For a moment, he looked around the room, first at his lawyers who were suddenly fascinated by the papers on their desks, then at my family. For years, Jeremy had bought their loyalty. He paid for their cars, their vacations, their lifestyle. He made them feel like royalty. But now, when he needed someone to stand up and say he was a good man, they abandoned him. Rachel studied her fingernails. Conrad stared at his shoes. Louise was frantically deleting photos from her phone. Jeremy stood alone. The king of the castle had no subjects left. Finally, he spoke. I accept the deal, Your Honor. His voice was barely more than a whisper. The terms were brutal. Jeremy Hartwell would resign immediately as CEO of Apex Global. He was banned from working in the securities or investment industry for 10 years. He was ordered to pay $2 million in restitution to Lancaster Holdings, and he pleaded guilty to 1 count of wire fraud. The sentence carried 3 years of probation and a suspended prison term. If he violated the terms even once, he would go to prison. But honestly, the industry ban was worse. For a man like Jeremy, losing his status, his title, and his ability to make deals was a fate far worse than jail. Then the judge looked toward me. Miss Davenport, he said, do you have a victim impact statement? I stood and walked to the podium. I hadn't prepared a speech. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled, yellowed letter. The letter my grandfather had written years ago. I unfolded it slowly. My hands were perfectly steady. My grandfather, Maximilian Lancaster, wrote this to me 20 years ago, I said into the microphone. My voice was calm. It didn't shake. He wrote, if they do not respect the name Lancaster, let them carry a different name when they leave. I paused. Today, I am honoring his wish. I looked at Jeremy, then at my parents. I am not asking for revenge, I continued. I am asking for correction. A few people in the courtroom leaned forward. I request that the restitution funds paid by Mr. Hartwell and the recovered assets from the voided contracts be placed into a new trust. A murmur spread through the room. Not for me. I turned slightly, looking directly at my mother. To establish the Maximilian Lancaster Scholarship Fund. The murmurs grew louder. This fund will provide full tuition and housing for students who have been victims of financial abuse by their own families. My eyes moved across the courtroom. It will give them the resources to leave. It will give them the freedom to build their own kingdoms on their own terms. The judge allowed himself a small smile. It was tight, professional, but it was there. Request granted, he said. He brought the gavel down. Court is adjourned. The sound echoed through the courtroom. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It sounded like a door finally locking, keeping the monsters on the other side. I gathered my things and walked toward the exit. The hallway outside the courtroom was chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. And standing near the water fountain, huddled together like survivors after a shipwreck, was the Davenport Hartwell kingdom. Jeremy, Rachel, Conrad, Louise. They clutched the judgment papers with shaking hands. Their eyes were red, their faces pale. When they saw me, they rushed forward. Claire, my mother cried, reaching for my arm.